Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bradley Yater, and I am the marketing manager at GaggleAMP. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of preparing your employees for social engagement. A big trend on social media that keeps popping up and is getting a lot bigger is the topic of involving your employees in the marketing efforts and making it easy for them to share company content on social media. One thing that a lot of people realize very quickly is that before they can activate their employees, it's a good idea to train them and really give them some guidelines around how to represent the brand and how to engage in a way that is appropriate for the company. So that's what we'll be covering today. Um, Joining me is Douglas Spencer, and Doug's really a brand expert. He's got over 20 years of experience in pretty much every area of marketing. He's worked with professionals around the world in almost every vertical, from finance to healthcare. And now he actually runs Spencer Brenneman, where he focuses on branding. So let's go ahead and move on. So today's webinar sponsor is GaggleAMP. And we're a social marketing platform that lets companies amplify their social media through employees, customers, and partners. So we actually work with a lot of companies that are trying to do employee advocacy and activate their brands. And we've worked closely with Doug because he has so much experience with, the things that come before that, such as training. So without further ado, take it away, Doug.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This is one of my favorite topics to cover, so I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do. Understanding your brand strategy, in my opinion, is important for everyone in your company. Everyone, whether they come in contact with a customer every hour or never at all. But it's also very important for anyone who's going to be representing your company, especially on social. So I'm going to make the case today that brand training as the foundation of your social media strategy will pay off in ways you may not have imagined. But before I do that, a little bit of a caveat. I think it's important to be perfectly clear that brand training will not address everything. Brand training will not address stupidity. There will always be stupid people, even at the most smart and successful companies. Brand training will not eradicate stupidity, but it can find it, it can squash it. Here are just a couple examples for fun of people not really being smart on social. This happens every year. Wow, can't believe the Earth is 2015 years old. Time flies. Every new year we get those kind of tweets. And it's not just companies that have, or I'm sorry, it's not just individuals that have this problem. There's companies as well. This was from People Magazine. This was from the Emmys a number of years ago, 2 years ago. Waiting for Viola to break into "You is kind, you is smart, you is important." That is, of course, her famous line from her in her Academy Award nominated role in The Help, but this was in the context of How to Get Away with Murder. So that was really not pretty. That was really not wise. And then this one. This one is also a year old, but it's just too precious not to share. What I think would be the former social media manager at JCPenney was tweeting off the JCPenney account during a Seahawks playoff game, but it's apparent that he's had a few cocktails, and yeah, I would imagine he has a new job by now. He certainly has. So again, I want to make it clear that there's only so much you can do, but there is a lot you can do. So let's go ahead and move forward. Bradley did a lovely job of introducing me. He pretty much covered everything. I did want to also add that one of the things that I did in a former role was I was on a social media review board at a company of 60,000 people. So we were looking very carefully at not only the the activity on social for the corporation, but also who had accounts and did they really need accounts and were they using it appropriately? And so I think that gives me a little credibility here in this particular topic. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about why brand training is crucial for social. What are the basic elements to social and brand training? We're going to take a look at what does it take to create a program, and then what expectations should you set up when you create a program such as a social media training program. So why is social media so important? It may not be the cure for stupidity, but brand and social media training is a cure for apathy, and it can also be a cure for message confusion and inconsistency. Whether it's delivered separately or concurrently, there are two important benefits from your social media strategy that can be realized through brand training: improved employee engagement and more consistency across all messaging channels. I'm going to say that one more time. Improved employee engagement and more consistency across all messaging channels. Boy, I'm tripping up on messaging today. Let's talk about why those two are important. Starting off with employee engagement. One of the most striking lessons I've learned over the years is the power of brand training. When faced with enforcing brand governance issues or driving brand compliance, universally, those who had had brand training not only put up far less resistance to following the brand guidelines or following the company policy, they went out of their way to do it right, to build the brand. In fact, we had employee survey data that linked employee pride to working for a company that took its brand seriously. When they understand, they believe. So I wonder how many of you out there currently work or had worked for a company for whom employee engagement was just not a priority. For most of you, I imagine that it is the latter, the have worked for phrase that rings true. Why? Because employee engagement is directly linked to employee retention. If you work for a company that does not take employee engagement seriously, you've probably moved on. So it's also been linked to things like shareholder value. According to the Harvard Business Review, firms with high employee engagement experienced an earnings per share growth rate of 28%, compared with an 11.2% decline for those without employee engagement. And according to the HuffPost, 79% of all companies believe they have employment engagement problems. Engaging them in the company brand and then engaging them in social media really can help, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in a second, why that's true. And then finally, companies with high employee engagement had twice the customer loyalty, that like repeat purchases and recommendations to friends, than companies with just average employee engagement. Twice the customer loyalty. And I'll say this later on in the discussion again, but you cannot have happy customers when you have unhappy employees. And of course, there are many studies that really back up what I'm saying. But social media and brand engagement can really help build employee engagement. So I know what you're thinking, golly, how does that drive success in my social media program? Well, plenty of ways. So engaged employees are more productive and profitable. What does that matter to social media? Well, think about it. If you want to get something done, who do you ask? You ask a busy person. Employees who are engaged with your brand, who are productive and driving profits, will counterintuitively participate more regularly in and have more impact on social media strategy. They are more likely to stay after work. They're more likely to help somebody out with something that isn't their job. They are 2.5 times more likely to do those things, and that includes pitching in to further a company's social media strategy. So if you're a GaggleAMP customer, you know it's great, but it works best when employees want to use it. GaggleAMP alone cannot make people want to participate in your social media strategy, but understanding the brand really can. So what else? Brand training builds stronger teams. It can create stronger teams and create focus among employees around a common goal, a common purpose, such as expressing the brand through social media. And friendly competition between teams could do wonders for your participation numbers. Just saying. Next, better social listening. When employees are educated about what's important to your brand, they will become better social listeners, not only for what customers are saying and what the competition is saying, but also what other employees are doing. And that can help squelch that whole stupidity thing we just talked about a little minute ago. And then the next thing is the connection between happy customers, as I said, and happy employees is undeniable. You cannot have the former without the latter. The impact employees have on a company's clients is powerful. So when your employees understand your brand and the content of your social media, when they actually understand it, its importance and why they're sharing it, they will have credibility to help customers get it and understand it as well. I love that picture. Drives consistency. Anyone who has ever heard me speak before has heard me say that enemy number one of a strong brand is inconsistency. You name any successful, valuable brand, and I guarantee you they are taking a consistent brand expression in all its forms very, very seriously. By training your employees on the brand, you will further protect and grow it through consistent social media expression. And what's more, your social media program will sync up with the rest of your company's messaging strategy, making you and your work even more valuable. So brand training as part of your social media training or a core of your organization's employee development will engage more employees more meaningfully with your social media strategy and do so more consistently. And given that it's lunchtime where I am in the northeast of the U.S., there's one more benefit. Brownie points. All of those benefits I mentioned that are not directly connected to improving your social media program, if you can demonstrate that your social media program, including the brand training element of it, is delivering value across the organization, contributing to improved shareholder value, reduced turnover rates, you are far more likely to get the senior management support we all want, also known as brownie points. Okay, so that's my case for why brand and social go together so well. So here are the main elements of a social media and brand training program. Now I'm a brand guy, of course, as Bradley said, so my list is going to be heavy on branding because I truly believe that a brand strategy should guide all expressions of the brand. But let's take a look. So we've got the mechanics of the brand, mechanics of the social media program, the brand strategy, its promise, attributes, the connection it has to customers, your hot button topics, and your guardrails. So let's jump into that. The mechanics. Your social media program, it's clearly important, otherwise you wouldn't have it, but what is your overall program's goal? What is your schedule? What is GaggleAMP if you're a customer, and how do people get a GaggleAMP account? How does it work? And what's your rewards program? How do you establish engagement in the actual social media program? And GaggleAMP does a really good job of letting you do that. So next is a definition. You should have a definition, a common definition for the word brand for your people, as well as all the other words that might be unique to your business. There's a lot of different ways people express things. Like, for example, brand it's a word that's thrown around a lot, and often in varying forms and often incorrectly. Those who don't know branding at all may think that it's just the logo or maybe a tagline, and that would be incorrect. In my opinion, my definition of a brand is the emotional connection your customers have with your company or offerings. Now, mine is not necessarily the only definition or the only way to think about branding. Many companies look at it differently. So however it is that your organization defines brand, that's how you should talk about it in your social media training. The importance of getting everyone on the same page cannot be overstated. I'm going to throw out the word again, consistency. It's crucial. So here's something that's crazy. I think this is just crazy. The first thing you need is a brand strategy. And get this, according to a 2012, and granted that's almost 4 years old, but I cannot imagine much has changed, 60% of executives strongly agree that they know what their company stands for and what its brand, what's different about its brand. 60%. Okay. 46% of managers do, 37% of employees do. Okay, you're thinking 60. Well, that sounds like a big number. Okay, well, maybe, but that means that 40% of the executives running corporations do not know what their companies stand for. 40% do not know and do not know what makes it different from its competitors. 40%. And that's more than half the managers and more than 60% of the employees do not know what their company stands for and what makes their brands different. So how can you communicate to your customers who you are if you don't know who you are? Your company must have a clearly articulated brand and a strategy to go along with it. A strategy that guides every expression of the brand, visually, verbally, tangibly, intangibly, especially in um, social. So, a brand strategy, that is the first ingredient you need, bar none. So, if you do not have a brand strategy, then eek, well, if only you knew a brand strategy consultant. Uh, insert pause for laughter. I get it. Not, not. Thank you, Bradley. Not everybody does, and it happens. It happens with new companies. It happens with particularly older companies. But if you don't have a brand strategy, and your executive team is not planning to create one, it's incumbent upon you to put together a set of broad characteristics that sync up with both short to mid-term marketing goals and to get everyone in line with them as much as possible. But for now, let's assume that you do have a brand strategy, and from it, this is what you need to integrate into your social media training to engage employees, drive consistency, and realize all the benefits we've already talked to. A promise, attributes, how it comes to life, and how it connects to customers. So first is the promise. Make certain your social media army, or your amplifiers as I like to call them, understand your brand promise. What is it about your brand that marries your offerings, your customers' wants and needs, and the future? What is it that you do? Why is it you do what you do? Here are three that I think are really good brand promises along with, sorry about that, along with how they come to life in social media. So as any good caffeine addict, I have to put something in about Starbucks. Their brand promise is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. I think that's a really strong brand promise, but let's take a look at how that comes to life in their social media activity. Do 2 times the good. When you share a chai with a friend, buy an Oprah chai, get another free, and we'll donate 50 cents to support youth education. April 9th through 11th from 2 to 5 p.m. at all participating stores in the U.S. and Canada. So that really does marry well with their brand promise of um, um, inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. The next one is Nike, and you'll notice that a brand promise and a tagline are not the same thing. Their brand promise is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete, asterisk, in the world, asterisk, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Personally, I might argue with that, challenge that, but hey, it's a great brand promise. But here's how it comes to life in social. This is a tweet. Today is a starting block, not a stumbling block. Just do it. Again, a great combination of a brand promise and a tagline. And then finally, we've got Coke, to inspire moments of optimism and uplift. And I think this was a really good social campaign that really brought the brand promise to life. I think this was on Tumblr. Danica Patrick has signed the Smile petition. You can too. Just recreate our Make It Happy hashtag with your smiling face and show the world you want a happier internet. So that's just a quick example of how you can meld your brand promise with your social media activity. So next, we have brand personality attributes. Now, I think most people will recognize this image from a number of years ago, the Apple Macintosh commercials that really compared PCs and Macs based on the personality of the people who use them. And I think that's a really great image to illustrate that brands should have personalities. Apple and Microsoft certainly do have them. Microsoft would argue that it's not exactly this guy, but the point is they do have brand personalities. So exactly how does your brand come to life? Some brands have personality attributes they use to create personas in a brand. Like if Acme Inc. were a company, what words would you use to describe her? Here's some fictional examples that I came up with that might help illustrate my point. So a data warehousing business may have attributes like confident, alert, inquisitive. So for them, that means their social media work should uphold those attributes with content that is declarative, staccato, and moderately provocative. They should avoid content that is wishy-washy, dated, or old news. Here's another example. How about an enterprise HR platform that sells to organizations in the service industry with in excess of 1,000 employees? I could imagine brand attributes such as youthful, predictable, attentive. So content should be contemporary, not out of the ordinary, and timely. They should avoid anything that seems nostalgic, unexpected, or off topic. Well, brands have faces and they also have voices. What does your brand sound like? Verbal identities are really important. So some verbal identities avoid negative language. Some would never joke about anything, and some only make jokes. Other brands use purpose and values, mission statements, core competencies, whatever they're called. The point here is to make certain your amplifiers understand them and know how to use them. Whatever makes your brand sound like your brand, make certain you explicitly point that out to your folks. It may not be evident to everybody, especially around verbal identity, because that is somewhat nuanced.
Hey, Doug,
And then,
we've,
yes,
we've actually got a question around that.
ooh, like
Um,
it.
because I know that, you said, data warehouse company is, intelligent, observant, things like that. And then you said some other brands can be very, oh, they only joke and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you should include in the suggestions for your employees? Because I know, some people might think they're funny and come off a
Right.
certain way, and that could kind of go the wrong direction. So do you almost, I guess what I'm getting at is, do you almost recommend that while you have certain brand guidelines for how the marketing team knows how to do these, or the PR department knows what these mean, whereas the employees, you might want to give them a slightly different set of guidelines just to kind of keep it a little tighter and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely, and that I am going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but absolutely, you want to make certain that they get a sense of what's appropriate for your brand and what's not. And you can people learn by example. So lots of examples could be helpful. Even the more ridiculous, the better, actually, because ridiculous examples kind of help prove a point. Yes, absolutely, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. So then there's a connection to customers. So make certain they understand how your brand connects to your customers. What are the core tenets of this relationship? Uh, these will most likely align with your brand promise and their attributes, but it bears emphasizing. So let's take a look at Harley Davidson. They're very much a lifestyle brand, and that their amplifiers need to understand that the most common elements of that lifestyle and taper their activity accordingly. So understanding the kind of connection that makes your brand strategy work will help your amplifiers, better target their content, pick the right channels, and the right people. So you want to make certain that they feel your customers, that they understand what motivates them and what's important to them and what's not. And then your hot button issues. Make certain they understand your brand and your customers' hot button issues. Does your brand have hot buttons? Well, many do. What's too hot to handle? Certainly financial services, institutions, opulence, waste, and don't really think that's going to change for a while. Ensure your amplifiers are sensitive to that. Other examples are BP and the environment, any fast food chain or food chain and obesity, Target and credit card data, Walmart and wages. There's a whole bunch of different rightly or wrongly applied hot buttons for companies. So make certain your people understand what type of content might fan an existing flame. So here's one example. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, JP Morgan Vice Chair Jimmy Lee takes over at JP Morgan to answer your questions for 1 hour. Tweet your question early using hashtag AskJPM. I would imagine we all know where this is going. How much blood do your executives consume on a monthly basis? Ask JPM. So that did not go a full hour, by the way, but you have to really think carefully about hot button issues and how they pop up. Next is the guardrails that we just sort of talked about a second ago. So how much leeway can your employees take with your brand? So there's something to make clear. This is something that's very important to make clear. Now, granted, a tool like GaggleAMP makes staying on brand much easier than going commando, as it were, but still there's opportunity for even well-meaning socializers to lead your brand strategy astray. You can minimize those situations even further by giving them guardrails. And what do I mean by that? So some examples of social media activity that they're free to do without fear of causing brand damage. That's great. You can give them examples of that. Certainly amplifying any GaggleAMP content without alteration is top of that list. But perhaps they want to embark on a get more likes crusade. If you're comfortable with that, tell them. If you're not, tell them. You might be getting ready to migrate one to another account that they may not know about, so a get more likes campaign would be counterproductive. What about repurposing already public content, like copy they see in an ad or a web headline? If you're okay with that, let them know. On the other hand, if there are actions that you definitely want them to stay away from, spell that out too. And remember, better to be too specific than not specific enough. For example, tagging your company in a joke or your senior management team in anything is probably not a good idea. Referencing internal meetings in social media, probably not. Talking about the competition, that is so tempting to people who aren't trained in marketing and social media, and that can be very dangerous. So the list goes on, and it's really important to spell that out so they understand what they can do and what they really need to stay away from. So does that make sense? Bradley, you think I covered that question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think yeah, you hit the biggest point, which is you can't ever be too specific,
Right.
because people will always find a way to show you a new example of how not to do things on social media.
Right. Right. Okay, so now we've talked about what's part of your brand strategy and how that applies to social. What does it take to create a training program, a social media training program? Well, the answer to that question, unfortunately, is it depends. It really depends on your organization, on its size, its culture, any existing education programs it already has. It's politics. Unfortunately, that's huge in many corporations. I can't help you decide how to go about it, but I can give you some thoughts to figure it out for yourself. So let's take a look. The first would be, oops, this slide is, first would be who. Outside the social media context, I passionately believe, as I said before, that the answer to that question is everybody. But for now, we'll put that aside. For the purpose of this discussion, the question of who may seem pretty basic. Well, if I have a GaggleAMP installation, people with an account. Okay, that's easy, but not necessarily. What if you don't have a GaggleAMP installation? What about your content creators? How much do they need to know about your social media program? They might be creating content for another reason, and so if they know about your social media program, if you train them on that, they might be able to provide you with content that's better. Do they need more in-depth review? What about people that may interact with your brand on social on their own, or just are opinion leaders in their space? So as those of you who have heard me talk before know, I have some time in my past with Thomson Reuters, and the Reuters news business had lots of people on there that were their own kind of mini personalities. They had a name for themselves as leaders, as reporters, and so those people should understand your brand strategy program too. So again, that's the who. But also another who is who's going to provide the training. Are there others in your organization outside the social team or the marketing team who are most qualified? For example, if your company culture is overly hierarchical, well, you may need to consider people with seniority to give the training so it has more credibility. The what. This one is directly, sorry, I've kind of lost my place here. So what are you going to include in your social media training? It's really important to think about all those things we talked about in the mechanics earlier, a little earlier before. All the things in terms of the social media planning, the brand strategy, all of that. You need to think about your organization, what's important to them. So if you're an organization that doesn't have a big focus on brand, you might want to think about de-emphasizing it a little bit. The how, it doesn't have to be expensive. There are a lot of budget ways to go through there through a host of technology options such as webinars, something like what we're using now, WebEx. You might also need people with time to develop the content, so that's an important one. And then when do you do that? Do you do that whenever whenever there's a new employee? Do you do it quarterly? Do you do it monthly, yearly? So you got to think about what works for your organization, and that's very important.
Hey, Doug, I actually want to step back on a point of the um, who part and who will do the training, because one thing I've noticed from speaking to Gaggle managers and other people working in employee advocacy is it's really helpful if, again, you're not at a super hierarchical organization where everything has to come from the top, is to find some of the employees that are kind of really enthusiastic about this. They're already doing it. And have them actually provide the training, because then it's not like, someone from the social media team, that's an expert that
Right.
this might be second nature to, they might use language or assume things that they know is common knowledge, whereas, an employee that's done this outside of the marketing department really understands where the other people are coming from. So I think I think it'd be really powerful to have just a normal employee that's super enthusiastic about this to help provide the training, because then it makes it a little more personal and relatable to the people that you're trying to get on board.
Oh, I totally agree. The reference to I would suppose you call it an abnormal senior person, is just an example. I wholeheartedly believe that, yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it, and a lot of people that can do it. For example, a brand ambassador program that might exist is a perfect example of how you can leverage people in the field, so to speak. So there's this peer-to-peer learning, this peer-to-peer understanding. So that's very powerful. But you want to make certain that you give them all the tools they need in order for them to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're running a little bit late, a little bit behind, but I will try to endeavor to catch up. And let's see. Oops. Okay, we're going to go through these. Sorry about that. All right, so what expectations are you setting up when you say, all right, we have a social media training. It is heavily based in brand, but we have a social media training, and this is what's going to happen. So what expectations are you setting up in that context? Well, let's take a look. So first off is enthusiasm. In order for your employees to bring real value to your social media strategy, they have to do so enthusiastically. If their hearts aren't in it, you may as well go it alone. For anything to work, it has to come from a place of sincerity. Even in the social sphere, people can smell insincerity from a mile away, and few things erode a brand faster. Next, eyes and ears. Now that they know who you are as a brand and how it best comes to life through social, let them know they are now deputized to be social brand police. Phrase I don't particularly like, but I'm going to use it in this context anyway. They should be on the lookout for negative sentiment in the market, for outright complaints, rogue employees, competitive moves, anything that might challenge both your social media strategy and your brand's growth. They should be on the lookout for. Next is thoughtfulness. Well, what do I mean by that? All right, well, good judgment might be another label. Ask them to step back and think carefully about their social media lives as they begin to promote yours. Have them think about the channels on which they choose to share content. Think about any personal associations that may not sit well with some customers. So, for example, if they're rabid Hillary Clinton fans or Ted Cruz fans, which they are certainly entitled to be, perhaps they should sit out pushing your brand's content then. If your customers are potentially alienated by those kind of political views. Integration. This one's really great. You've got to encourage your employees to not approach social media partnership in a vacuum. Remind them to integrate the content in other parts of their world and personal lives. Share contents of posts with customers when they're on the phone with them. Mention what's trending in your company while they're talking to people at parties or family gatherings. So make certain they integrate the content. And here's one for you. You should expect mistakes. It's a two-way street. Make it clear that what they can expect from you, um, but you should expect that they're going to make some mistakes and you're going to clean up after them because, well, that's your job. Okay, so what else? What else can they expect from you? Well, they should expect content. Committing to providing them with content to share with regular and reasonable frequencies is imperative. You've got to commit to the content being relevant, in line with the brand, and worthy of their time and attention, which they're basically giving you. Tools like something like GaggleAMP or any kind of content aggregators, any kind of listening devices if it makes sense for them. It's really important to give them the tools they need. Guidance. The employees you train should know that you are there to help them if they need it. If they get stuck or if they're unsure about what they should do, they should know that they should ask. Respect. They should expect respect from you. Make it clear to them that you respect the commitments they have elsewhere in both their professional and their personal lives. Make it clear that integrating your content into their social media channels, especially their personal ones, is by no means compulsory. They are free to abstain without fear of repercussion, and you've got to also make certain that that is a genuine expectation you set. And here's another one for you. Make it clear to them that they are appreciated. Work hard at demonstrating that the company appreciates their efforts, that it's having real impact on meeting common goals, and that their participation is really what's making it happen. Again, GaggleAMP makes rewarding employees pretty easy, so I would recommend looking at that capability. So why is it important? Let's talk about that again. It brings enthusiasm, teamwork, better social listeners, happy customers, brownie points. What do you need to teach your amplifiers? You need to teach them mechanics, brand strategy, brand promise, brand attributes, connection to your customers, hot buttons, guardrails. So that is a recap of the last, 35, 40 minutes, and I'm going to open it up to more questions.
Yeah, I just I'm going to jump back a tiny bit because I feel like the last few slides you just went through really tied into the same kind of theme of, respecting that your employees are trusting you to provide them with good content and not make them look like a robot or,
Right.
just another marketing channel that you can kind of, abuse. And that I feel like that relates to the enthusiasm, the respect, and a few other points that you hit. So I mean that honestly, it doesn't, that part isn't up to them. It's up to the content providers, and it's really up to the social media manager who's managing this strategy to make sure that the message that they're sending to the employees, they feel comfortable sharing themselves. Just kind of put yourself in their own shoes and say, would I be okay with sharing this with my friends, my family? Would I feel good about this? So I think that's one of the most important factors in this, because you can get people on in the beginning, but if you abuse it, not only are they not going to be engaged, but they're going to leave.
Right.
And you can
Absolutely.
it can backfire. So it's very
Well, yeah,
important.
it is. And another way to look at it is marketers ruined email. In terms of a tool for reaching out to customers and prospects, marketers ruined email. Let's just face it. And we have an opportunity with this channel, with this medium, to do a better job. And we need to make certain that we're respecting not only the channel, its content, but all the participants therein.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree on the email thing. When you get 20, 30 marketing emails a day, it's not hard to hate it.
Right.
So I've actually got a question from Janet, and she wants to know from your experience where the financial sector fits into social media, and have you seen them personally use employees as amplifiers? And I'm guessing this is coming from kind of a regulation angle, perhaps, because I know that
Sure,
the
sure.
financial sector is definitely a little slower when it comes to adopting things like this for fear of the SEC.
Right. Right. No, that's an excellent question, and there are so many compliance issues, and that goes back to the idea of training and the guardrails, what they can and can't do. So yes, I have seen financial services companies of different degrees use social media. Now, if it's institutional, then they typically have a bit more restraints than, say, a retail bank. But it also depends on the channel. So I would say that more institutional financial services organizations are able to use things like LinkedIn better than they would, say, Twitter. And how that works is just having thought leadership, having a really strong content marketing strategy, and then making certain that people in their LinkedIn profiles are allowed to simply like content that the organization has put out on its page, and not really give a whole lot of latitude to folks to do kind of their own riffing and do their own kind of thing, but provide them with content that they're able to react to and share. And that's really the way that most financial services organizations, or any organization that's heavily regulated, tends to approach social media, really from a thought leadership and content marketing perspective.
Great. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree, and definitely don't give financial advice on social media.
That's right. Or legal advice, or healthcare advice, or
Exactly. So, all right, well, we're about 11 minutes over, so I think we want to, first of all, thank everybody who was able to stay on. I know we only grabbed you for 30 minutes, but very valuable information in here, so definitely appreciate it. And I just have one final message for everyone who's still here.
oops.
There we go. So, as far as not only being a wonderful webinar presenter, Douglas is also joining us at Amplify this year, which is the Employee Advocacy Conference. It's actually the first and only conference around right now that is focused on the idea of involving all your employees in marketing efforts and what goes along with that. We've got speakers talking on topics around social selling and how to set up those programs and what it takes to really make sure that your sales team is successful without being, almost using it as like a cold calling type avenue, which can backfire. And Douglas is joining us to talk more about employee engagement and really just expand on what we covered today, which was, how to use this to engage your employees through training and really just help them, love their brand and really be more enthusiastic supporters of it. So we have a special offer for everyone in this webinar today. And if you use the code webinar50 while registering, you'll get 50% off of the full 2-day conference pass. So please use that. And this entire session was recorded today, so we will be following up with an email so that you can share it with your colleagues and view it at your leisure. Thank you, Doug, and thanks everyone else for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Take care.